Hello, and welcome to another gameplay analysis video. Before I begin, I want to propose an offer to any of my viewers. If you enjoy this type of video, and you're looking to get your own gameplay analyzed, please comment below with a replay code, and I will do an analysis of your game in this style. The only catch being is that you have to be willing to have your game uploaded onto YouTube, and that it has to be a 3 or 4 player game, as I know pretty much nothing about 2-player games. This offer is really for anybody, as long as you make a comment, and if there's enough traction, I will try to do something like this once a week or so. Anyways, onto the game. This time, I am looking at my first 4-player game in the International Championship Masters Division. My opponents this game, in the first position, Lamda, rated 1851. In the second position is Tordread, rated 1759. I'm in third position, rated 1811. And in fourth position is a familiar face, Martin Pschur, rated 1892. Now, moving on to the game itself. If we look at the overview of Leaders and Wonders, something that's very interesting in this set of wonders is that I don't think it really synergizes too well with the leaders that are available. There are small synergies like Fleming and maybe Marlene Chaplin into Internet, Gates with Empire State Building, and also Gates with Manhattan Project. The other wonders like United Nations, Red Cross, don't really work well with the overall game plan of the Leaders and Wonders. UN is generally a small point wonder, and Red Cross is not super well supported with the colony strategy this time. There is some thin lines with Columbus, Isabella, Cook, Maria, but there is no Suez, so colonization is a little bit weaker than it would normally be. Labs are really only supported by Bill Gates, but it does look like that theaters are a little bit better supported. Chaplin, Dietrich, Fleming, and lines from Gaudi and Shakespeare into these leaders. That being said, the leaders may be well supported, but there's no Hollywood to cap it off, so the wonders that you would be getting are a little bit smaller than the typical H3 wonders. One other synergy to note is that there's Watt Railroad, so that Empire State could be a little bit better, and then there's also the aforementioned Statue and Ocean Liner, which I mentioned in previous videos, make irrigation a little bit better. This set of wonders with Hanging Gardens, St. Peter's Basilica, Great Wall, Forbidden City, Eiffel Tower, they all help support happiness in some way, so you're probably not looking for a happiness solution from H1. Now with all that covered, let's go on to the game. Lambda takes Library of Alexandria. It's the only wonder that's on the row, and it's the only one that was able to drop. There are pretty good wonders, but they're still on the deck, so I think it's a good idea to actually be the one taking the only available wonder. There's plenty of leader to choose from, and I do believe that it's just better to get the access of wonder and leader as soon as possible. So picking a library makes the most sense. It does leave a engineering genius and a leader on one civil action for Tordread, and no reason not to pick them up. Here, I had a decision which leader I'm going to take. I'm going to go for Hammurabi, just because the wonders are forced to drop. I think especially the extra civil action might help me more easily take a wonder on 2 civil actions. I'll take the urban growth as well, just because it's the only yellow card available. And then Martin takes Aristotle and urban growth. I think that makes sense. The most sense. Yeah. Lambda, who already has a wonder, is going to go for Hippocrates. So takes Lex leader and then just does the standard actions. Tordread, already in a good position with leader and engineering genius, going to get pyramids on 1. Lex Boudica builds a mine and increase pop, just more standard things. Here, I'm going to reach for Roman roads on 2 civil actions, so definitely going to pay off having this Hammurabi, especially another wonder that takes 4 civil actions total. So this extra civil action from Hammurabi is going to be really worth it. And then otherwise, I'll just do standard things. Martin has no wonder to take, but elects Aristotle and then grabs alchemy here and builds a lab with urban growth. Lambda, he pretty much does standard things. Not really anything interesting to take, so he goes with Richland and Frugality here. I think that makes sense to not go into consumption right away. Tordread also builds his lab, goes for iron on 3, And again, not too many interesting cards in the middle of the row. He could potentially take knights, but there's nothing really much else to do with his last civil action, so grabbing early iron definitely makes sense. Here, I'll build my mine, grab Richland, and I'm also going to grab something on 3 civil actions. I think Code of Laws is pretty comparable in power level pretty early to something like Iron, so extra civil action, really nice to pick up. Again, don't think there's anything too interesting in the middle section of the card row, so I might as well just reach for Code of Laws here. Martin goes, grabs Masonry, increases population, grabs Knights. So he did go for this Masonry at the expense of not building a mine. Otherwise, I think the pickups make sense, just grabbing more science, but delaying this mine is a little bit questionable in my opinion. Notably, he also skipped St. Peter's Basilica, just because I think Ravages of Time would be so would be pretty devastating for with St. Pete's as your first wonder. Lambda takes Engineering Genius 1 off. For 2 civil actions, take Breakthrough, increase pop, and I think that makes sense. Next turn, he's set up to finish Library, and something to note is that we actually haven't moved the deck at all. We've had quite a few opportunities to seed, and nobody seeded on the first round. Here, Tordread goes for Iron Right, and upgrades immediately, grabs Richland. So he has the opportunity to upgrade 2 more times next turn, and just really getting his really getting his iron production up very quickly. Also reveals a fighting band. Here, since the deck is moving so slowly, I make the decision to go for Alchemy here. I am not sure if this is the correct decision in hindsight. It is possible that I want the resources first and the science second, but I thought that if I was going to go for Code of Laws, that maybe getting out a little bit more science would be, getting more science production could be prudent. I have been saying that these games have been getting a lot more greedy because, especially if not seeding neutral events, you're more focused on actually just increasing your production. So I thought that grabbing Alchemy would basically play in the lines of being more greedy. But like I just said, I'm not sure if I should have focused on these resources, increasing my science production, or just finishing this wonder first. Martin, also I'll increase population, and now Martin's turn. He seeds, first person to seed after basically 8 opportunities, opens development of agriculture, and actually builds a knight, reveals medieval army, and grabs Columbus for 2 actions. Increases population, got a corruption, so Columbus means he probably has a good territory already, and yeah, so, but at the same time, since he's revealing this medieval army, it's also really projecting that he has an aggression here. There's almost no reason to go for this tactic, to go for the strength right away, if he didn't have an aggression, because he could have increased his resource production with a mine first, or increase his science with alchemy first, before having to actually commit to strength. It's definitely very awkward to go for strength before you've even built your 3rd mine, so I'm not really sure how I feel about this commitment. Obviously, he's not looking for strength in the event deck yet, because it hasn't even flipped. So just applying a little bit of pressure, but it is only a 1 card defense, so it is really hard to actually get an aggression off. Lambda, he finishes Library, and then just barely responds to strength by building a warrior here. Here, Tordread gets extra resources from Boudica, finishes upgrading his mines, also only just builds 1 warrior here. Here, so I could respond like Lambda by only just building a warrior, but the thing is that I've been Hammurabi, so I think Hammurabi is a little bit less inclined to be able to actually defend, just because I've been drawing fewer cards. So one of my objectives this turn is to actually get to 3 strength. So I'm thinking about these swordsmen here, building 1, and then grabbing this monarchy, which could be very good with Hammurabi later. There is an argument that I could just grab monarchy and do a revolution here, taking a little bit of corruption, but just immediately getting that and saving science could be really nice. The thing is that when I do set myself up with a swordsman, I set myself up for a revolution to not take corruption next turn, so it can be good, so I don't have to waste any resources in this manner. It's also a good idea, I think, to get the swordsman, just because that Fighting Man has already been revealed, and just getting a military tech out can make you a lot safer. Here, Martin doesn't do anything with his political action, increases population, builds that third mine finally, develops masonry, and grabs Evergrowth. Setting up to upgrade these alchemies with a slight discount here. Lamda takes iron, goes for an upgrade, and that's his whole turn. Yeah, I think that would make sense also. Not much else to take, maybe breakthrough, but he already has good science production from the library, so just increasing your production really makes sense here. Tordread finishes his pyramids, grabs knights, copies medieval army, and is actually setting up for a good amount of strength possibility next turn. Unfortunately, this is something that I actually didn't see in the game. I didn't see the possibility of him going for increasing population twice next turn and then building 2 knights. So my best course of action here is to probably take Nostradamus, do a revolution, and then upgrade this warrior here, so I still get out of corruption. That being said, because I didn't actually see this, I didn't actually respond to the strength very well, I instead go for the revolution and take this breakthrough. If I could do this turn over again, I would definitely take Nostradamus. It just makes the most sense to be able to defend in this manner. Especially because I don't really need the science with the alchemy that I have, and then Roman Roads will pick up science in the H2. So Martin goes for alchemy, upgrades, and grabs irrigation here. So just doing stuff to possibly develop his get his resource production going. Or sorry, some production going. Here, Lamda goes for Nostradamus. I think that makes sense. There's not really easy other ways to defend, so defend this possibility from Tordread. So I think that Lamda, me leaving him Nostradamus, is just a big mistake that I made, and it just gave Lamda a much more comfortable position. Tordread, increased population twice with frugality, goes for Joan, and then builds 2 knights for 10 strength total. I think that Tordread is in a great position here. He has 5 civil actions, 3 military actions, fully upgraded. Iron, I don't know what more you can really want coming out of H1. Here, I would have really liked to go for Leo. I think that's what I was thinking in the game, that I would eventually grab Leo as my leader. But the thing here is I do have to finish these Roman roads this turn if I actually want to have them. And since the deck will not make it around back to me, or the age will end before it comes back to my turn. So if I want to finish that, and I want to actually look like I can defend, I actually go for Khan here. I think this looks like I can defend with a 1-card defense, and especially with 3 military actions, even though I didn't really draw that much, it can be assumed that I do have a military card or a defense card in here somewhere. And because I take a leader on 1 civil action, I'm able to fit in this cultural heritage as well. So that could supplement a little bit of the science that I'm missing from Leonardo. Martin seeds. This is only the second. We're almost done with age 1, and this is only the second card seeded. Flips development population, goes for Code of Laws, grabs cartography, and then is going to finish another medieval army here. Lamda seeds, flips developmental planning, goes for monarchy, develops it right away, grabs swordsman, develops him right away, and then finishes a legion tactic. So also got himself into a reasonable defensive range. Tordread, thankfully, doesn't aggress me, and goes for a seed instead. Flips developmental markets, takes trade routes from the development of planning. Something that was commented here is that one of the options for our trade routes is development of politics. If Tordread, myself, and Martin all have the opportunity to take development of politics for age 2 cards, but you can see here that Tordread takes the development of trade routes, and because he takes markets for food, he is able to increase population and get out of to deal with his happiness this way. It is susceptible to rebellion. It is something that he doesn't know about, but it's just the cleanest way to deal with his unhappy workers. Okay, after building this temple, goes for a Great Wall, so this will be further into it's a very easy way of also getting more happiness, and has plenty of resources to actually build wonders. Here, I am also going to take trade routes. One of the things that I have available for me is that I'm going to take this coal, go for an upgrade right away, and then also build a swordsman here. One of the nice things is I've used all my resources so that my blue bank is empty just enough so I don't have any corruption, and that I'll have 7 food next turn so I can increase population twice here. I don't have to worry about rebellion, so just having those unhappy workers is totally fine. And I think just increasing my population next turn would be pretty nice to do so I won't have 3 foods just stuck lying around. I also like this turn to do it this way so that I do actually get into totally defensible range against Tordread, so I don't actually even have to bluff the card anymore. Martin, he's the only person who hasn't had resource production, so he grabs the iron here, builds the mine outright, and goes for bread and circus. Martin, I think, is the only person who could have taken development politics if he wanted to. He did take trade routes just like everybody else, and I'm not sure if that's the correct decision. I think Tordread and I had really good reasons to take the development of trade routes, just because it kind of like shored up our strength or our population a little bit better. But having only 2 military actions does make trade routes a slightly better pickup. Something I did want to mention is that my previous draws I got very lucky, so even though I didn't really go for the very strong development of politics, I got defensive army right away, so obviously I'm rewarded for terrible play. Okay, moving to Lambda's turn, he seats, flips development of science, finishes upgrading his mines, grabs justice system, and goes for forbidden city. I think this is going to be a great position for monarchy to have 7 civil actions with an age 1 government already set up, so I think Lambda is in a very strong position here. Tordread seeds, flips development of warfare. Everybody has a free worker for it. Tordread finishes the Great Wall going up to 15 strength, and thankfully, instead of grabbing cannons here, goes for the scientific method. I think this makes sense for his production, but I'm really happy to see that cannons has fallen to 1 civil action for me. Here, I increase population twice, go for code of laws, grab cannons, and selective breeding here. Taking selective breeding here is a solid action, and I think it's probably the best one to take most of the time, but I am actually not sure if it's possible. I'm not sure if that I need to grab it for 2 CA. It's going to take me a very, very long time in order to actually finish upgrading coal before I can actually go for the selective breeding. So something that I could think about instead is go for this cultural heritage and then finish up and then upgrade a lab 1 more time. The reason I say this is because being on monarchy without any extra civil actions on top of code of laws, having 6 civil actions is a relatively nice place to be in H2, but it's still a little bit tight on civil actions overall. So maybe grabbing selective breeding on 2 isn't necessary. It's possible that I could be in a situation later in the game where I am able to grab it on 1. But the thing is, Martin, although he has irrigation, hasn't actually developed it yet. So I did want to leave myself the option of going for food if I really needed to. Overall, I'm not sure about how I feel about it, just because I know how long it's going to take in order for me to actually go for food production. And then I upgrade that warrior, getting intel strength and activating con bonus. Martin, he increases population, takes that free warrior, goes for Brendan Circus, basically gets out of that possible rebellion, and then also goes for cartography here. So every strength that he got was a pretty natural one, but it does make him stronger than me. Lambda does not seed, goes for justice system here, finishes forbidden city, upgrades one of those warriors, and grabs efficient upgrade here. Yeah, I think it's possible that you could take an opera here. I think it makes a lot of sense in general, just because of the leaders that are well supported by theaters. But instead, you don't actually necessarily need to go for that route. And just take these extra resources. The only thing is, I think that opera on 1 CA is a pretty reasonable game plan for the long term in terms of culture production, especially since he has iron developed already. You can definitely afford these very expensive buildings at some point. Tordread seeds flips border conflicts, so I am the weakest one. I do get affected. It's unfortunate. I didn't really think my opponents were pushing strength that much, but I end up facing a strength event here. Then he goes for a scientific method, uses those extra resources to upgrade the labs, and then grabs an opera here. Also builds 1 more temple. Here, I was in a bit of a crossroads here. First off, I didn't really know what to disband, whether it's a lab or a resource or a mine. So pretty much my whole turn, they it comes together in a kind of interesting way. I pretty much had to think about how the game would develop. I had to think about my long-term plans here, what I was really bottlenecked in, and how I wanted my population to actually end up in the future. So here you're going to see that I have these 5 cards available on the row on the 1CA slots. And because I think theaters are a relatively good plan to go for in the long term, I'm actually gonna set myself up for Shakespeare here. I think Shakespeare, just the happiness, the happy face that he provides, is actually pretty useful for me since I don't have any clear happiness solution. Maybe I can eventually build operas and transition from Shakespeare plus operas to go into Marlena, so I don't need to actually take more happiness solutions than that. But in the meantime, I also have to take this Statue of Liberty in order to deal with that, in order to deal with my happiness issues. So what I decide is that I'm going to disband this lab here. It is my biggest bottleneck to be bottlenecked on science, but at the same time, I'm thinking that if I do go for this Shakespeare, maybe it's okay that I got this disband. It is costly, but perhaps I wanted to disband it and then go for these journalisms instead. One more thing is I did decide to go for strength here. I decided to build a cannon, and it's possible that I could skip going for that cannon for this turn so that I increase my production. Granted, I would be the weakest again. I would not be getting extra culture from Khan, but all my opponents, even though they're on iron, have better production than me, and doing this cannon cost me that extra production earlier on. Coal takes a really, really long time to pay off, so every turn that I spend on coal not upgrading feels like a really big cost to me. That being said, like I said, I do set up for Shakespeare. The happiness, I don't really necessarily need the whole combination, but the happy face itself can prove itself to be useful. The biggest problem with this line is that I did take Statue of Liberty, which doesn't really work well with Monarchy. I think that maybe Eiffel Tower could have been also a better wonder overall. And another big problem is that Shakespeare himself is a very action-intensive leader, a very civil action-intensive leader. And having 6 CA is not the best setup for Shakespeare overall. So this whole game plan does come together, but it also comes together in kind of a very shaky way. If I want to go for the greedy economy line, I could not develop these cannons, not build one, go for this upgrade, probably take Eiffel Tower and maybe either play Cultural Heritage or take Frugality here. Okay, going on to Martine's turn. Oh, also I do reveal the defensive army. If there are strength events, I do want to be the benefactor, and I don't think that most of my opponents are set up for it. The person that really benefits is Lambda, though. But anyways, like I said, going on to Martine's turn. Martine seeds, flips develop territory. He's probably the one who seeded it himself, and he did develop the cartography, so it does pay for itself that way. Goes for Catherine, didn't have a leader to begin with, grabs Rifleman, and then upgrades in mine here. Oh, something I should note is that my opponents, because I see this defensive army, if I have a war here, it's very easy for me to switch into Shakespeare and just build one more cannon in order to actually fulfill 2 tactics. So I was also hoping that playing this line would make people respect strength a little bit. Martine doesn't completely fully respond. He's not going out of his way to grab strategy or anything, but he does grab this Rifleman, and it is possible for him to go for double upgrade here and maybe reveal classic army. It wouldn't defend completely, but it is probably the most reasonable amount of strength that he can put up with his amount of science and civil actions. Lambda grabs strategy, grabs selective breeding, goes for selective breeding here, and I really don't feel like Lambda really responded to any strength push at all, any possibility of war. So even though I'm threatening it, you don't necessarily have to respect it completely, and I do think Lambda does get away with it very well here. He is bottlenecked on science, so he does build one more lab. And then Tordread goes for constitutional monarchy, grabs selective breeding, and he set himself up with a very gouty type of hand. Tordread also did not have to respond to my strength push, and I feel a little bit upset that my opponents were able to play so greedy and get away with it. But wars are not super common. I didn't draw that many cards, so it kind of makes sense that once one person doesn't really respond, the rest of them aren't really going to respond either. I can only have one target after all if I had a war. But like I said though, I was only hoping that they would respond to strength. They didn't necessarily have to, and playing in a more greedy way sometimes in the mid game pays off pretty well. So here, I believe that this is actually my first seed of the game here. I'm actually going to seed Reign of Terror. I finally know that I'm not going to be one of the weakest ones, and I'm not pushing while I'm weakest, so I flip Cultural Heritage or Cultural Influence, upgrade a Mind, play Reserves, upgrade the Mind again. So I finally get my Resource Production upgraded, grab Architecture, grab Efficient upgrade here. And then play Cultural Heritage. It is possible that I can skip on this Efficient upgrade and then play the Architecture right away. I do need to worry about civil action efficiency here, and I know that something I need to do in the future is play this Architecture so that I can build the Statue of Liberty in one step, that kind of thing, and obviously I need to develop my urban buildings. Oh, something that I didn't note on the previous turn is that Tordread did deny this journalism, so I didn't get to pick it up last turn, but there's another one falling, and it's pretty unlikely Martine will get it, but it's possible that Lamda will try to go for it. I think it'd be kind of weird if Lamda did go for it, though, since he has 3 labs already. Going to libraries is... I've made this mistake before. I think going into libraries after you build these labs with scientific method, possibly available. I think scientific method is just the stronger way to go. This is not guaranteed for him, since Martine will probably not take it, since Cavalryman is going to be the one that's on the discard slot. So I would assume that scientific method being on the row right here, it would really disincentivize Lambda to go for journalisms. But going back to what I said, I don't have enough civil actions to really go for all of Shakespeare's things with opera, with architecture, with journalism. And it is possible that even though that sufficient upgrade is, well, efficient, it could just mean that I'm costing myself a civil action by grabbing a yellow card here. I also don't draw anything really relevant here. Anyways, Martine goes for Republic, destroys a mine, builds a lab, goes for cannon. So this is the first time I actually see that there's some response to strength. It's a little bit delayed, but he does need the 6 science to go up to a military tech, and he can go for something like mobile artillery or classic army possible here. Lambda offered me scientific cooperation, and I have to reject it. I think he offered it to me because our science production is pretty similar right now. But the thing is that if I allow this cooperation to go on, Lambda can go directly into scientific method this turn, and I think it would just be too abusive of a relationship. I'm not going to be able to upgrade my science very easily over the next few turns, and I think that it would just be a mistake if I were to go for it like this. So as much as I wanted to accept scientific cooperation, I just couldn't. So Lambda takes some cards, grabs Breakthrough, grabs Urban Growth, and grabs Scientific Method. Tordread seats, flips Barbarians. This is the last turn where he won't be one of the 2 weakest, because he goes for Gouty here. Develops and upgrades his selective breeding, goes for Gouty, and grabs Reserves and Architecture right here. So he did really have a Gouty type of hand, and I think this makes a lot of sense. Save some science, has good food, has good resources, has happiness solution set. I think Tordread, the only thing that he's really missing here is military techs. So here, the journalism did fall to me, so I will obviously grab it since I have Shakespeare. Seed politics and strength here. Flip scientific breakthrough. Develop my selective breeding, go for efficient upgrade, build a cannon, flip to Shakespeare so I don't have happiness issues, grab this journalism, grab frugality, and grab urban growth. So I talked about maybe taking yellow cards is too expensive, and then I think that taking this urban growth is, again, too expensive on my civil actions. If I talk about this turn as a whole, there's quite a few things that I think could be considered inefficient here. I could have upgraded my food more. I didn't have to build this cannon. Focusing on my production would actually allow me to build my buildings and actually develop my buildings. Uh, and just taking these yellow cards might not be the most efficient in terms of my civil action use. While I do think that saving resources or getting some yellow cards is very valuable, like this frugality for extra food will be more valuable, I don't think that saving resources is necessarily as valuable here. So I really wish that instead of urban growth, I had developed architecture here, and maybe either just floated an action or denied navigation. Urban growth is not a card that I need as action that I need to play, and if I actually play these technologies out of my hand, I can maybe grab necessary H3 yellow cards like Revolutionary Idea or H3 military cards like Military Theory or Air Force. But I do decide to build this cannon here and forego not upgrading forego an upgrade on my farm because I kind of see that there is a rich land in the deck that I don't think anybody else really is looking for. So I'm looking to even save even more resources that way, which again is just in the wrong mindset, I believe. Because I have good resource production, because I'm civil action light, I need to not think about saving all those resources so much. My urban buildings are actually very cheap. With coal production, this is each round of this or each pair of opera plus journalism is I can afford with just one cycle of production. So the idea of saving all these resources is just the wrong mindset at this point in the game. But lastly, the one reason that I did go for these cannons is because I did not want to have to draw, or I did not want to spend H3 military actions to develop my army. So I figure that if I do my fulfill my second tactic here, that I can be strong for a little while, not have to spend any of my military actions and get maximum draws. Okay, moving on to Martine's turn. He develops cannons, increases population, plays patriotism, and just means the warrior, and fulfills 2 mobile artilleries here. So finally gets stronger. Yeah, kind of got away with not getting stronger for 2 turns, but I couldn't really punish that, of course. Maybe he was able to defend anyways, but I think that just being able to delay that strength really increases economy in some way, or was able to make his upgrades not as awkward. So takes breakthrough here and then also develops irrigation before it expires. So looking at an age 2 overview. Although I missed the age 1 overview, we all had upgraded production at the end of age 1 and relatively similar signs at the end of age 1 as well. So, but going on to age 2, one of the things that I'm really lacking is I'm lacking civil actions compared to my opponents. Obviously, my science is also a little bit lacking, but I do have more resources. So I'm hoping to be able to build journalisms very soon in order to catch up in science production. Another thing to note is that I believe never mind. I was going to mention that I believe that my opponents don't have a lot of military actions, especially Martine, who is relying on the third military action from Catherine. So Lamda, with also only 3 military actions, is also not very threatening, but he actually has strategy in hand. So it's very likely that out of all the people here, Lamda has the highest war potential. He has my tactic available with 5 swordsmen built. So can eventually go into cannons and just build more mobile artilleries that way. I'm sorry, I meant to say defensive armies that way. Yeah, other than that, none of us are really pushing or running away with culture. But I do think that having 6 civil actions in age 3 is a big limiting factor for me. Okay, going into Lambda's turn, he cedes, flips Cold War, so the only benefit that I've gotten from being strong. Really nice since my science production was low. Goes for Maria, which definitely makes sense, increasing his science a little bit, and also getting extra resources with Maria bonus later on. Takes and develops organized religion and builds 1, and then goes for strategy. So, yeah, was able to defend now he's finally in a defensible position. Didn't really stress his economy in any way in order to do so. So I think, again, being a little bit greedy has paid off because I wasn't able to do anything about it. Tordread, able to get these riflemen, plays reserves for food, increases population, goes for team sports, and then build a team sports, and upgrades twice for a classic army. So opponents finally catching up in that military game, which I'm not planning on pushing for a while, but I do end up just being a little bit stronger for a bit. Here I seeded strategic territory. And the reason I see strategic territory here is because I think it's just less impactful in the game. There's a whole deck of cards in the way. I just don't think strategic territory will come out early enough to be relevant. I didn't want to seed Ravage at the time. I essentially am saying that I'm okay with my opponents keeping their Age A wonders. It wouldn't affect Martine at all. And I didn't want to upgrade their culture production by 2 and 1. I just wanted to leave it as it is. So I develop architecture here. I need to deal with my happiness. And I go finish statue and grab military theory here. Taking this rich land, grabbing this military theory, these could be things that I am not valuing my civil actions enough. Instead of rich land here, instead of taking rich land, I could maybe develop journalism or opera, just so that I can start getting them out of my hand. It is very, very difficult, even if I had population increases, to develop, pop, build. That could be like my whole turn. So actually getting the text out of my hand instead of saving resources is probably the right call. This military theory, on the other hand, I do think that this is actually worth the take. It's such a good technology. It denies Martine from getting more military actions, denies him from being threatening for the most part. So I do like this military theory pickup, even though it's so expensive. I really like the fact that it really stifles the amount of strength that my opponents can push. Anyways, I discard the Ravages of Time, get Impact of Architecture, which isn't good now, but with Shakespeare it could potentially be a pretty good impact. Martine, he seats, flips Crime Wave, him and Lambda are affected, finishes Ocean Liner, increases Pop, grabs Oil, grabs Revolutionary Idea, grabs Wave Flash, Nationalism, and grabs Efficient Upgrade. So really using those extra civil actions to good use, and definitely can do pretty well in increasing its production next turn. Has a good amount of science, has good tactics, so it's very defensible and can just increase production in such a way that you can have a booming economy in Age 3. Lambda offers scientific cooperation to Tordread now. This is basically one of my worst fears, is that Tordread and Lambda are going to just really run away with the extra technologies that they're able to develop. And I had the opportunity to be part of this pact. Maybe I could have been part of the pact for one turn and just canceled it, so that Lambda wouldn't get as much effect from it. But I think two people just having a scientific cooperation pact going with relatively good cultural production between both of them is just so strong, and it's really hard to fight against. So Lambda goes for these cannons, copies defensive army, gets a second defensive army, goes for scientific method, and is able to upgrade a lab too as well. So Tordread and Lambda both around equal production, but Lambda definitely has the possibility of getting more science to make this a little bit more unbalanced. That being said, Tordread is Gaudi, so all these urban buildings are incredibly cheap to go for now. Tordread seeds, flips Orange Industry. Tordread and Martine get a little bit more than Lambda and I. Increases population, goes for architecture, goes for journalism, builds one, and grabs reserves and satellites here. Here, I make a somewhat controversial decision here. I know that I seeded Politics of Strength earlier in the deck, and I am not 100% sure who to offer this military alliance to. From my perspective, though, on this turn cycle, I believe that, one thing is Air Force is on the row. So I am not going to be taking Air Force. So one of the things that I'm thinking about is that I don't want to offer this to Martine. I'm a little bit afraid of his strength potential having Air Force available, even though it doesn't have a lot of military actions that could change in the future. And I want to actually work against Martine's strength. Earlier, I also said that I believe that Lambda is a person who I'm also a little bit scared of. He has the strategy and 5 military actions, so I didn't really want to offer the military alliance with him either. That being said, offering to Tordread does leave me to be in a pretty weak position, and it's possible that the politics of strength will come out while I'm the weakest here. But I do see a certain line in which Martine does not cede, finishes another tactic, and then Lambda maybe uses some Maria resources by building one more unit or upgrading a unit. So all I would need to do is going over Martine's strength of 33 for one more army. All I would need to do is develop military theory, and then I would be stronger than him. It's kind of a long shot, but it is a line that I see, and like I said, I'm a little bit scared of offering strength to Lambda or Martine here. So here, I do go for that journalism. Increase population, finally build it, take this revolutionary idea, and upgrade a farm here. Yeah. Pretty much all I could do. I think this revolutionary idea is pretty much a mandatory pickup. I wish that I was able to have developed one of these urban buildings earlier and actually was able to build an opera here right now. Basically, if I didn't take that rich land and maybe just had the opera built or opera out, I would build that instead, increasing my culture production quite a bit and also saving me from possible civil unrest or emigration. Martine does not cede, goes for oil, uses efficient upgrade, upgrades again, uses wave of nationalism, and then builds one more army. Sorry, he takes a lot of these cards, takes movies, chaplain, air force, and then builds one more army. A little interesting to do it in this order, but yeah. So although he's not looking strong offensively anymore, doesn't really have enough military actions, he is looking to defend pretty well with these technologies here, and then also increases culture production quite a bit with just one big jump. Lambda cedes, flip civil unrest, so I get punished for my civil action inefficiency earlier. Plays reserves for food, increases population, goes for architecture. So he increased population to get a little bit extra science, so he could go for this architecture. Increases a lab once more, built a cannon with Maria resources, goes for multimedia and movies, so he is setting up for Fleming in hand. And especially with engineering built already, these buildings are going to be very, very cheap. Tordread offers peace treaty to Martine, which I think makes sense. Martine is not going to be offensively threatening, so just extra culture production looks great for those two. Grabs Churchill here, develops satellites, grabs military theory, grabs UN, and yeah. And one of the things is UN is not usually a great wonder, but with Gaudi, with all these types of urban buildings built, he only needs to build opera in order to make UN a 20-point wonder, plus whatever impact you have in hand. One of the things to note on my turn is that there is pretty much all the wonders in the game left here on the row already. Empire State will never be a strong wonder for me, but Internet is very possibly a good wonder for me to go for. So once again, because I haven't really developed anything, I haven't really started my Shakespeare stuff, I'm unable to spend the turns actually grabbing Internet here. 4 civil actions is just too much, and I also, because I know that political strength in here, hopefully getting a few good impacts, I'm going to actually start Shakespeare stuff, and then play the revolutionary idea and develop this military theory. So I do end up the strongest. It is pretty natural strength, so it's not really looking like I pushed for strength, but I just happened to get there. So maybe Martine won't get stronger, or maybe politics of strength will flip before the next turn. I do leave some pretty good cards like Engineering Genius and Urban Growth on the row, and this is somewhat the cost that I've taken by spending my earlier actions on yellow cards. I'm not able to actually efficiently take wonders that I may need, or take maybe even more resources in hand as opposed to the earlier buildings. You can really see here that although I did save a lot of resources from rich lands and efficient upgrades and blah blah blah, I didn't really need it, especially because my buildings are so cheap here. At least the one thing I have going for me is that 13 culture production is the highest amount of production in the game at the moment. Martine here, seats, plus prosperity, Increased population with Ocean Liner, goes for movies, gets +8 culture production right away, grabs engineering genius, grabs computers, grabs urban growth, and grabs internet here. So basically cleared out pretty much all of the remaining wonders possible. Not that Manhattan or Red Cross were very good for me anyways. Lambda seats, flips politics of strength, so I do win that. Unfortunately, there are not that many good impacts for me that are actually good against Tordread as well. So most of these end up being pretty neutral. Anyways, Lambda takes Fleming. Alex builds multimedia, builds a library, grabs patriotism here. So Lambda is finally getting his cultural production up here. One of the things though is that he did skip out on the Manhattan Project that fell off. He's pretty much the only person that could have gone for it. No one else's science production is really that high at the moment. During Torch's turn, he was able to grab Air Force on one civil action here. Goes for Opera, builds one, increases population, goes for Patriotism. So has a bunch of resources in hand, pretty much defensible for anything, doesn't need to really worry about too much here. Here, Red Cross is just not in the cards for me. I still need to develop my urban buildings, but I do get Marlena here. So first I see Impact of Architecture. I think that it's pretty much the best wonder against Tordread, or the best impact that I have in my hand against Tordread. Impact of Variety is obviously very weak. Impact of Competition, I'm very weak in. And I think Impact of Happiness could be a little bit better for me as well, but the thing is that Tordread is so close to finishing out his happiness that at the most I can get only 2 extra points with another Opera and Marlena. So increase population, build another pair, grab Revolutionary Idea, grab Marlena. My thought is that I do want to go for Democracy, but there is one more Democracy in the deck. There isn't much else that I can spend my resources on, so I'm hoping that I can just get a big amount of cultural production and catch up to Tordread. Martine seats, flips fast territory. I don't bid on it. I kind of want the resources in hand. Something that I wanted to actually go back and look at is that I was marginally worried about Tordread when he had this knight here. I was marginally worried about the idea of hybrid war in his hand. I think if he had hybrid war with Patriotism with Air Force, could have built 2 more knights in Air Force and go up to about 60 strength, 61 strength. I do not have enough resources in order to go for all of that. In order to defend enough, even if I get modern infantry, I can't upgrade enough and build another cannon. So I'd have only get 1 full tactic and 1 outdated tactic, and that would make my defense only around 50-ish, maybe 55-ish. That being said, it's only hybrid war that was possible, and I ended up drawing it, so I knew that wasn't going to be a possibility. Anyways, Martine, he goes for Democracy here, upgrades the farm, so he's out of starvation, builds a theater, build a knight, plays a Revolutionary Idea, grabs reserves here. So he has quite a bit of resources in hand. He actually has enough to build another movies and then another movies on top of it next turn, just because of how much resource production he has, and then build the internet after all of that. So Martine, even though his culture production was a little bit lagging, his resource production has really pushed his culture up really high, and is poised to build a really big internet next turn. So I think the only person that's looking not threatening is Lambda, just because it's taking him so long to actually get his stuff going. Lambda seeds. Here he actually looks at my hand. So he's worried about my strength potential, my potential to war, since I could do so with Air Force and Revolutionary Idea. But since he looks at my hand, he has Air Force on the row, he's going to deny it. I do also want to talk about this colony. When this colony was being bid on, I really didn't want to look into how much I actually needed, or calculate how much I needed to put into this. So one of my general rules is that if I don't know, then just don't bid on it, and colonies can't screw you up. But seeing as that Tordread got it for so cheap, I probably should have tried to bid at least 11 with cannon and swordsman, just because I only need to rebuild one with Marlena. Having the extra population available would just allow me to build another pair here, and that itself could just be worth it just to have that population available. Sorry. Anyways, Lambda goes for develops movies, increases population, builds a theater, and grabs air forces to deny that possible war that I have. Lambda is completely correct in doing so because I definitely would have warred him if he did not do so. Tordread goes for Churchill. Use military buildup, rebuild some of those knights. Starts the UN, mostly get out of corruption. Takes and develops civil service, takes and develops military theory. So you can really see how this scientific cooperation has really paid off. He did not have the highest amount of science production, but he was able to develop so many of these blue H3 techs, and also very cheaply develop these urban buildings. So Tordread didn't really need to increase science production and just was able to really benefit from it a lot. Here I see the impact of balance. One of the worst realizations that I had in this game is that I am not going to be able to catch up to Tordread. The reason I'm not going to be able to catch it is if I look at his civilization here versus mine, is that I'm going to end this turn with around 90 culture as well, after going for democracy, after switching to Marlena, after building a opera here. So if I end this turn around 90, and Tordread also has around 90, with UN plus whatever impact that he may have, I'm going to assume that his next turn is worth about 35 points. 35 points on top of my production means that he's going to end up just a little bit ahead of me in the culture department here after my production. After looking at the majority of the impacts that are available, I am pretty much losing on almost every single impact except for culture and industry. With that knowledge, I know that it is pretty much impossible for me to actually catch up to him, and I take a coward's way of seeding by seeding that impact of balance here. There is actually one possible line in which I'm able to catch up, and that is with culture and strength, or culture and competition. And I did not take the best line in order to do so to try and win. And the problem with seeding one of these two right now is that if all three of my opponents seed in front of me, there is a chance that my impact would flip before my turn comes up. And I'm not going to be able to go for impact of strength this turn, or impact of competition, and I'm in fact losing pretty much in both of those by a lot. And my big worry was that Martin is actually also very close to me, even though it doesn't look like this on the scoreboard. He can go for another movies next turn, and then build that internet, like I said, for approximately 28 or so points. So with Martin's turn being like worth maybe 50-ish on his last turn, any amount of gap that I have, I need to also beat him in impacts as well. So if something like Impact of Strength flipped as the very first card from this deck, then I would really be losing to him as well, or it's very possible that I'd be losing to him as well. But that being said, I really don't like my cowardly seeding just because the impact of balance is equal for pretty much everybody. Everybody has balance at 6 except Martin, who's balanced at 4, but could very easily go to 6. I think the smartest choice is probably to go for this impact of competition, just because Martin is not that much higher than me, Tordread is not too much higher than me, and I plan on increasing a lot in the future with getting more infantry. The super brave way to go is for impact of strength, seeing as the biggest difference against both of them, and then just kind of sucking it up. And if I flip impact of strength first, but that might be a little bit too brave, And all of this is in the hopes that I also draw Impact of Culture to seed next turn. But like I said, I took the Coward seeding, and I go for this Democracy, develop it, build one more Opera, go for Marlena, grab Revolutionary Idea, and then I also grab this Professional Sports. There is an argument that instead of grabbing this Professional Sports, I could have built one more library at Library when I was Shakespeare, just so it'd be cheaper. But I'm looking at this Impact of Strength here. I think this is the best impact for me across the board if I get for Modern Infantry. And in order to get Modern Infantry and develop this Positional Army, I would also need one more cannon. So going ahead and disbanding a military unit that I need doesn't really seem like the right play. Okay. And then moving on to Martine's turn. Martine plays reserves, goes for endowment, increases population, builds movies, goes for computers, or develops computers, takes reserves, and upgrades the farm here. So Martine's culture production extremely high now. Obviously a little bit lower than mine, but like I said, he's going to have a huge internet. Lamda seeds pretty much has a relevant turn. Strategic territory also became pretty irrelevant as well. Goes for Martine wins it for a knight. Goes for rockets, increases the competition a little bit. Destroys a lab, builds a temple, increasing the impact of architecture possibly, and then just takes a few texts to deny people. Tordread seeds, flips impact of progress. So such a huge boost for him last turn. He got an extra +12 from civil life and military theory. So that was just a huge swing. There's no way that this would have come out earlier. This was the only impact in a deck filled with Age 2 cards. So increased population, plays reserves, finishes the end. Doesn't have an impact to evaluate, so that's one saving grace. And then finishes another classic army. And then just take some cards. Here, yeah, I do the big seed. Didn't get anything else really. So go for impact of strength. For architecture, I am slightly better against Tordread, otherwise equal against Martine. Take and develop one infantry, and then I'll destroy a mine in order to go for a cannon here. I did draw Impact of Harmony earlier, so I know that this doesn't affect my balance or anything, and Harmony is unaffected since it should be in the discard. Martine actually upgrades his labs, and because he upgrades his labs, I pretty much suspect, even though that he didn't seed this turn, that he put in Impact of Science, or is at least playing around it this turn. So he's playing around it, and maybe he has a slightly bigger internet because of it as well. But if I think that he has put in Impact of Science already, then I know that I'm in huge trouble since I'll be last in Impact of Science, and Tordread will be another 5 points ahead of me. And then after this turn, Martine finishes the internet for 30. And we can see after production, we can see it's pretty close between the top three of us. There's a slight gap here and a slight gap here, but Lamda is pretty much out of the running. So Impact of Wonders, slightly better for Tordread and me, but also not at the same time. In agriculture, it's better for me over Martine. Impact of Technology, equal for me and Tordread, but better for Martine. Impact of Strength, better for me, of course. And so one thing to note is that even though this is only a difference of 4 between myself and Tordread, there is only one impact in the game that can actually cover it, and it's Impact of Culture. And there's one more. There's one more before I talk about it. This difference of 4, the only impact that can cover this difference of 4 is Impact of Culture and nothing else. So I know that there's no way I can catch up. There's no way anybody sees Impact of Culture, and the last card is Impact of Science. So Martine and I end up 9 difference, and Tordread and I also end up 9 difference. So it's ended up being a very close game. Something to be said is that if I did flip that Impact of Strength, and instead of me getting 15, I got 5, and Martine got 10, and Tordread got 15, then I would have lost to Martin as well. So obviously, I think seeding that impact of strength is just too much of a risk that I don't need to take, seeing as that there was a 1 in 6 chance that I would have lost against Martin here. So one of the reasons that I talked about this civil game inefficient or civil action inefficiency throughout my game is because of how close this ended up being. Granted, there are other things that I could have done for culture, like maybe seeding a little bit more aggressively, or upgrading my production a little bit earlier, as opposed to going for strength. But I think the real big killer for me that is controllable for me is how efficiently that I spent my civil action turns. I think it's very likely that I could have developed my cards in my hand before trying to save resources, and if I had done that, I maybe didn't need to spend other extra civil actions later on as well, taking things like Revolutionary Idea for 2 civil actions or the other Revolutionary Idea for 1 civil action. And if I was a little bit more efficient, maybe I would have got my culture production up faster. So maybe this gap could have been a little bit closed. Granted, I'm sure there are things that Tordread feels like he could have done more efficiently, but this is just coming from my perspective. I think that coming out of H2 and coming in H3, I need to respect that there are going to be many cards that I need to take, things that I need to deny, things that I need to develop, and just being on a lower civil action count means that I need to be even more stingy with my civil actions than I usually am. This is something that I'm very good in HA, but after you have more than 4 civil actions, after you have more than 5 civil actions, sometimes you get a little bit loose with them, taking yellow cards, and even then, that might be too much of an overkill. One last thing to look at are the standings of this tournament so far. With one more game completed, I am still at the top of the leaderboard, but Tordread has 1 victory and only 1 game played. Marcin for sure has 2 games played and only 1 point, so it's possible that he's doing the worst. That being said, Taught Silence and Lambda both have a game played and have only picked up last places so far. So these are standings right now. It's only been 3 games total, so there really isn't much to say about the total standings since a lot of movement can still happen. So nothing really conclusive here. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.